everyone, welcome to this joint webinar between Biner and Scaled Agile. The topic of today is lean portfolio management, one of my personal favorite topics these days. Been thinking a lot about lean portfolio management, and I've heard a lot about it from the SAFe framework, for instance, and all the buzz that is going on right now around the world on this topic. So we will have a short agenda for the session. If I can get my equipment working. So nothing advanced about it, just this short introduction first of the topic and of me and Rune, my colleague here from Scaled Agile. Then we'll go into lean portfolio management in SAFe from the framework. Rune will give you a very thorough explanation about lean portfolio management from a SAFe perspective. Then I will come back and talk about lean portfolio management from a more practical or pragmatic point of view. And I will connect and summarize back to what Rune has been talking about as well. So we'll get probably two sides of the coin covered in this webinar, hopefully. And then we will open up for questions, and I believe the chat is open already, so please shoot your questions at any point and we will try to address them at the end. And when we go into introductions of ourselves, it would be very nice if you could also just provide a short indication who you are, where you're located in the world, and what your current role is, for instance, or your interest in lean portfolio management right now already. Then we can open up for questions. So, short about Biner to start with. I'm from Biner, and we are a consultant and training company operating between IT and business, as we used to say. We're not a business management company, and we're not a pure technical IT company either. But we are experts on agile ways of working, business analysis, architecture, and change management, for instance. And you can read all about that on our webpage, of course. Short about me, Daniel Bjarsch. I've been at Biner for some years now, and I'm both a trainer and a consultant. And I have a long career in architecture. My background is systems developer from starting out in the public sector here in Gothenburg in Sweden as a Lotus Notes developer, which was very close. I have realized years after what we did then was very close to agile ways of working, as we talk about it today. But at that point, I didn't realize. Then I got more and more involved in architecture. So I have a strong connection in the architecture community. So I do a lot of, for instance, TOGAF classes and training. TOGAF being the granddaddy of frameworks, you could say, for enterprise architecture. And I have my other leg in the Agile community since many years back. So it's a very powerful combination, if you would like to put it like that, combining architecture at one end of the spectrum and agile ways of working on the other end of the spectrum, and watching these worlds come together on later years. So I do a lot of SAFe trainings as well, mostly the SAFe for Architects class that is very popular in my area. And I also have assignments as enterprise architect at different companies, both in the public and the private sector, mainly here in western parts of Sweden. So over to Scaled Agile, and you, Rune, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. I thought my introduction was on the next slide, but I can wait with that. I'll introduce the company instead. So Scaled Agile, yeah, we've been around for, like you say here, more than a decade. Started up as sometimes we still feel like a startup company. I mean, we haven't even crossed our 200 employees yet, and still we have probably the most popular scaling framework in the entire world. I think the last time I checked, we were up at around 37% of companies using scaling methods and frameworks. So we're, of course, really proud of being able to do that. We're the supplier of SAFe, of the big picture. I'll show you that in a little while as well. And we are on our 5th revision right now, say 5. Of course, ever working on improving and extending a framework wherever it makes sense.
Yes, continuous improvement. As
always. So a little bit about me. I've been working for Scaled Agile for just about 2.5 years now. I work from my established home office in Denmark. That's where I have my office, so I'm not located in the US. I am a strategic advisor, so I advise companies. I help out our partners with, well, anything that has to do with the practical appliance of SAFe. So I'm a SAFe SPCT. I get the privilege to train other SPCs in how to use and explore with the framework. I've also had a lot of experience inside the software industry. I've been mostly in the telecommunication industry, been working mostly on the DevOps side of things, a lot of hands-on coding as well, working in operations environment as well, but later on moved into transformation for various companies. So I've been a little bit around as well, and I did some coding. Not very good at it, but I can probably still do it if I really have to.
Thank you very much. And since we are distributed now, not co-located, I will do the pushing of the slides. So if I don't keep up with your pace, Rune, please let me know.
Absolutely.
But let's dig into your content.
Let's dig into my content. So again, let's talk about LPM or lean portfolio management and why we need to shift to it in the first place. Where do we start, and why do we start in the first place? So let's take a look at this on this slide here. I'm not a big favorite of text slides, but sometimes it actually serves to highlight a few points here, looking at some of those challenges. If you've been in larger organizations, if you've been working in portfolio management, project management, governing larger initiatives, you may have encountered some of the challenges you say here: annual planning problems, overload when you look at the capacity available, using phase gates as a way to get objective evidence whether our solution is right or not, etc., etc. So a lot of these challenges is feedback that we've seen from many different clients, that these are the challenges we would like you to help us with inside the SAFe framework. So of course we've been spending many years perfecting this, but as Daniel he said earlier on, it's really picking up using LPM. A lot of organizations have been using SAFe for a long time and is now seeing that something is missing. If they want to really scale value into the organization, they need to be able to scale into the portfolio itself. So I would like to show you some of the challenges we're facing and some of the solutions we're trying to provide with LPM. So let's take it to the next slide. So very shortly about lean portfolio management from a SAFe perspective. It's one of our 7 core competences we have. You will see here that every competence we have is broken up into 3 pieces. We have our strategy and investment funding part that is really talking about connecting our strategy to our execution. It's talking about how we fund our initiatives, epics in our sense, how we realize those epics, how we establish flow inside the portfolio. We also have our agile portfolio operations that really help us operate the entire portfolio. And at the end, you have our lean governance, also looking at how do we do budgeting, how do we do forecasting, how do we coordinate compliance, etc. You also see inside these competencies here, there's a lot of these small people. You will see the executive in the enterprise, you will see an enterprise architect and other people. So these are typically roles, people that exist inside the organization already, that will now need to take on additional responsibilities inside LPM. So we're not setting up necessarily a whole new function with 20 new people. We draw upon the knowledge and expertise that's already in the business, and maybe having a few select people added in here as the roles that we need. So when we talk about SAFe, and I appreciate, I don't know if all of you know in detail about SAFe, but you've probably seen the big picture before. Your first glance at the big picture tends to be a little bit overwhelming, which is also why we try to say, let's focus on the essential parts, the bottom-up part of the framework, and then let's wait a little bit with portfolio management until we get a better grip on how to actually execute. So what you'll see here is I kind of try to highlight the topmost part where lean portfolio management exists. You will see the competency I talked about, one of the round icons out there to the left. And then you'll see all the different parts, bits and pieces that are important elements in the portfolio. We're talking about wanting to connect the enterprise strategy down to the people who do the execution. We want to do that using strategic themes, formulated as OKRs. We want to create epics or big enabler technical initiatives, and so on and so forth. So we have a different layer here focusing on different parts of the SAFe portfolio that we're in. So let's move forward. Good. So some of the points I listed in the beginning, some of the challenges that we're facing in the organizations are those mostly positioned on the left side here. Some of the traditional ways of working that we've come from, and then we want to work towards a shift to a more lean agile approach. So why would we do that in the first place? Well, it's got something to do with the way that we address changes and challenges today is somewhat significantly different than we did before. It's a more volatile world. We need more innovation. We have customers that want solutions ever faster. We have too many ideas. We have too little capacity. So many of the changes that are required will need us to shift from one place to the other. You won't need to do it all at once. Some companies have already done parts of it, but at least you need to look at these 6 main areas if you want to move to a more lean agile approach, supporting the rest of your executing organization. Let's dive in a little bit deeper to some of these. First of them, and now that Daniel talked about favorites, this being one of my absolute favorites to work around, also something that's been going on in organizations for a long time, moving away from this organizational approach where everybody is organized in functional silos. So what we're trying to say here is that the work we do, the value we create in the organization, it flows through all of these silos. You will need to have a little bit of business insight. You will need to have a little bit of requirements insight. You will need to have some design. You need to have some coding, some testing, etc., etc., etc. The thing is that when we need to do this work, previously in our projects, we needed to make sure that we had good handoffs. We needed to ensure knowledge was transitioned. We needed to ensure that responsibility and ownership was transitioned as well. And it created and still creates a lot of bottlenecks and loss of information when we do this. So one of the first things we need to very seriously look at, also some of the first things we do in a SAFe transformation, is to go into this virtual organization that we call an agile release train that is organized around value streams, could be your major solutions, could be your major services that you have, and create these agile release trains, teams of teams that collaborate and work together so that knowledge is shared internally, that work transitions internally, and they become much more independent and can act much more decentralized compared to the left side. Hopefully that will gain us a faster time to market and a higher value to our customers in the end. Then, yeah, well, I said the other one was my favorite. This got to be my next favorite. For all those people who have been project or product managers, you will probably have faced the fun of going out to, you have your project, you need to go to your departments, your silos, your cost centers, if you will. You need to gather up the right people, get them allocated at the right time. You may need to make sure that the work you have is upfront so that you can get the right people allocated. And you can be absolutely sure once this web of changes has been done, you will need to redo it all over again once something changed in your project, whether it's new technology, whether it's a new scope that comes in or something else. for a fact, things change, and as we start to do this kind of funding, it just becomes really cumbersome to do. So from an LPM perspective, what we want to change here, we want to actually, you won't find projects in SAFe. They do not exist. I realize that some implementations still have them. It's a transition, as we say. But instead of funding projects one by one, allocating our money to that in a more or less fixed sense, we want to go to funding the development value streams. So I mentioned before, we try to organize our people in development value streams around the major solutions and services that we have. So what better way than to fund these value streams continuously and let them focus on the solutions and the quality of those solutions, and thereby they can work and continue to work even though technology changes, even though requirement changes. That's definitely one of the major shifts, and also one of the, if the last part about organizing was one of the first things we see happen, this is probably one of the last things we typically see happen with the shift to LPM. Let's take the next one. Thank you. Annual planning and rigid budget cycles. So I usually, either in my LPM classes or implementing classes, when we get to the whole LPM part, I'll start to ask them, how long time does it typically take to create your annual budget? And it varies a little bit, but there's a tendency to go between 2 to 4 months. Well, maybe more towards the 4 months that it takes to create the budget for an entire year. It's a huge event. It takes lots of time and scope and resources to actually get this done. And on top of that, what you're actually doing is you're locking yourself in for the next year. You're funding all the work that you need to get funded. You need to scope your things up front to actually make sure that you're funding it with the right amount of money. And then you need to go and execute for the year. Now, the challenge here is that, and all of us know this in this volatile world we're living in, that's not how things work. Things change. Like I mentioned before, new technology comes in, customers come with new requirements, we're taking on new customers, we're finding up new solutions. So instead of thinking that we can actually lock ourselves up and do this big upfront annual planning and budgeting, we want to take a little bit more flexible approach to this and at least go towards what we call this rolling wave planning and budgeting. And initially, that's at least our recommendation, what we see as a good fit organization, to put in a biannual budgeting process where you review all the initiatives you have going, you are reviewing the progress you have, your metrics, etc., and you try to figure out what do we continue to fund, how do we shift the funding back. Again, we're not talking about shifting funding from project to project. We're talking about shifting funding from value stream to value stream, from one agile release train to another, from one solution or service to another in general, so it can be maintained and improved. This is also one of the things, together with project funding, we don't see happen initially, immediately in a transformation. Let's take the next. Oh, you already took it. So overload of demand versus capacity. There's a few ways to look at this, but the positive way to look at this is that a company will always have more good ideas than they have capacity to carry out those good ideas, rather than thinking that you have too little capacity. There's an abundance of good ideas. So I like that part. The thing is that, and we see that in many organizations, that this unlimited work intake, spawning up new projects, having 10 priority 1 projects going on at any one time, not limiting the work that's going on, is filling up our whole pipeline of work. And for those of you who are a little bit interested in lean, knows that as we move above these 80% utilization in our organization, things actually go slower. The typical analogy is, if you look at the highway, could be the E45 going through Sweden that I drove on just the other day. As you hit Gothenburg at rush hour, you will see the 100% utilization and everything stops. So we want to move away from this unlimited work intake of over using the capacity you have to a demand-based way of working. So what does that mean? Well, that means we want to start using, as we do in all the other places in the framework, use Kanban systems to develop a pull-based system, even at the portfolio initiative level, to pull work when there's available capacity for it. That means using work in progress limits to limit the amount of work, something that's actually quite hard to implement at this level, because you will always have some new good ideas, but something else have to give. We can't just stuff more into the machine. It doesn't work that way. We also work with visualization. So some good stories when I've been working with organizations is that when we come to lean portfolio management, one of the first things I do is I put up a small board. I ask them to add all the projects that they are currently governing in the organization, and then I invite those senior leaders or executives to have a look at that board and say, look at all these things you have going. And they're usually quite surprised. Some of them won't even know the projects that's going on, and some of them think that, wow, 150 projects all at once for 1 year, we can't possibly do all of that. So this whole visualization of the work going on is a critical point to making the organization understand that we need to focus on this. We need to reduce the amount of work going in so we can achieve more flow and thereby actually getting more work done and get value to our customer. Then there's the big upfront commitments. So in the good old traditional waterfall world, when we needed to do a project, we needed to get all of the money. So we needed to do all of the specs, all of the requirements in there, at least some kind of pre-requirements we need to set in there. We need to understand the business case, all the implications that we have. Because if we did like a 50, 100 million kroner, Swedish or Danish, doesn't really make that much of a difference, investment, that's a huge risk. How do we mitigate this? There's a lot of work needs to go into this process to do that. Instead, what we want to focus on and move towards is this thought of doing an investment in an MVP. So you already probably know it, the minimal viable product. In SAFe, an MVP is not a paper prototype. It's not a drawing on the wall. It's a real product in the hands of a real customer that can give us real feedback on the solution. The solution may be incomplete, may not have all the requirements, but at least it's a tangible thing that we get feedback on. And that feedback from the MVP, that hypothesis we're trying to test, is something that the LPM will evaluate and decide whether we want to invest the rest of the money in the entire initiative before moving forward. So we're actually basing our decisions on some real feedback from the customers rather than a thought on some piece of paper. Good. Let's take another one. Another one of my favorites is this moving away from, again, a very traditional waterfallish approach with a phase-gated development, meaning that we try to do all of our requirements first. We go through them, we tick them off, they pass the gate, they go to design, finish all the design, we check it off, we move it on to code, move it on to tests, move it on to deployment. You know the drill. I think the worst situation I had in any company, and I won't mention any names, they're not a company anymore in that sense. They had at some point 43 gates they needed to put through. That's 43 different opportunities to slow down your work. Moreover, every time you're reviewing a piece of document, it doesn't really tell you whether the solution you have is right or wrong, both from a technical or business perspective. It just tells you something about the piece of paper that you have. So what we want to move towards is incremental development, where we incrementally build the entire or an entire piece of the system that we can demonstrate, that we can get internal feedback on. From a technical perspective, is the performance right? Is the security right? Should we fix something there? Or from a business perspective, because of course we get business people in for these demonstrations. Is this service that we're doing what you want it to do? This way, by getting this incremental development and getting this incremental feedback, we can change direction much faster. This is a little bonus slide. That was actually not on the list of problems, but it's just a little caution I want to put in here. Because as you shift from traditional to lean agile way of doing your portfolio management, you need to change your metrics as well. It won't help you to measure the good old traditional way working with lean agile ways of working. So you can't, for example, go and measure whether your milestones are complete or not. That's not going to tell you anything. You need to focus on different things here. some of the competency areas that we're focusing on. Competency, of course, are people skilled in the work that they do? Flow, are we improving the flow of work and value to the customer? And outcomes, are we actually getting the value, the money, the positive feedback from the solutions that we're doing? So as you're shifting from traditional to lean agile, you need to start removing your old metrics and installing some new metrics that will guide you to this new way of working. Let's take another one. Yes, so how do we do this specifically? Well, I always like to say, well, if you want to do something new, you need to learn how to do it. And our course that is the most in-depth on this subject is, of course, the Lean Portfolio Management course, which is what we call a 2+1 day course. The 2-day course takes you through, I know Daniel said that I will go through it in depth. I can't do that in 20 minutes, but at least I can do a little bit of promotion of the LPM, where we spend 2 entire days taking you through all the concepts of lean portfolio management, all the way from defining your strategy and until how you actually execute it, how you build your Kanban systems, etc., which principles and mindsets you need to have in place to do this. And then, in addition, we'll have this optional workshop that is part of the license, if you will, where you can actually take those concepts that you learn about in the class and then go through the workshop for your company on how to actually implement this afterwards. So we use a case study for the course, and then we use your actual context for your company in the workshop afterwards. So I really like that combination. It seems a good fit. You could put in some break time in between. You can maybe add some more people into it if you want to have that done for the workshop. That's entirely up to you. Good. And just to highlight a little bit things, what's been going on here, because as Daniel said, there's a huge focus on lean portfolio management. I mean, we have, 20,000 plus customers now that's been doing SAFe for a long time. And the further they get into their transformations, the higher the need they see to start focusing on being more efficient and lean on the portfolio, how to coordinate your different value streams and agile release trains in a sensible manner, how to bring these improvements you're doing not only local to your single little portfolio, but spreading it out for the entire organization. You can kind of see here that in 2001, we actually had a break where LPM became the most taught advanced course in SAFe of any time. So it's a huge growth. I don't have the 2022 numbers, yes, but I know they are higher than this. So more and more organizations see this as a challenge now and really want to make this move. So we're, of course, excited and happy that people are liking this product that we put into place. Let's shift again. So I'm not meaning to scare you with another big picture. I'm just trying to show you with this that we have tried to organize all the feedback we get from the customers who actually do LPM into implementations. So we both have American, European, and Asian companies in here that have given us feedback on how do we take the theory and put it into practice. And then we put all of this feedback into what we call some practice guides. That's the huge web you see here with some proposals of how you could implement LPM in your organization. And of course, all of this information is available in detail in the framework if you want to study it further. I'm not going to go into detail about it here, but it's all the way from aligning your organization, how to actually organize around your value, like I talked about, how to strategize, how you actually create your OKRs, your strategic themes, and your vision, moving towards the actual operation. What events do I need in place? When do I need to have them? Who should be involved in this process? How do I handle change management? Moving on, of course, to governance. And like I ended up with here just a short while ago, how do we measure and ensure there's growth? How do you make sure improvements are done even at the portfolio level? So we don't just install something and forget about it, but actually continuously improve. So there's a lot of information that you can read about, but I also look a lot forward to hearing what Daniel has to say about his experience from the LPM field.
Yes, thank you very much, Rune. Excellent presentation. And I really love this stuff. I love the content that is provided by the framework. It's so packed with insights. And I have done some investigations on the field of portfolio management and lean portfolio management and value stream management. That is also a popular concept now. And I really agree that this is one of the more thorough approaches to lean portfolio management. And I'm also really excited about this new LPM course with the workshop add-on, where you can actually go home after 3 days with a tailored action plan for how to do this in your own organization. I think that's an excellent opportunity for everybody that's interested in this. So, and I see we have questions popping in. We will save them for afterwards. I will say a few words also from my perspectives, and then we will get to the questions together, maybe providing slightly different perspectives, or maybe not. We'll see. But thank you, Rune, for this excellent presentation. I will just have these 3 points talking about lean portfolio management, more from a generic point of view, focus a little bit on the benefits, on why you should do this again, and sort of relate back to what Rune just pointed out, and how to get started, and what could be hard, and what impediments you might find on the way, collecting from my experience in my customer cases and so on. So it will be a mix of theory and practice from the field and relating back to the SAFe framework material. So first, lean portfolio management in practice. It's a common question that I get in my customers' assignments from customers or people around me in general. What is it that we have to do that we don't have to do anymore, and what should we do instead when we do our agile transformations? What should we stop doing? What should we start doing instead? And what roles do we don't need? What skills do we don't need anymore? To me, that's not a valid question, actually. It's more about how should we do things differently? Because you still will need your competencies and your skills and your activities. You still have to do pretty much the same things. You still need portfolio management. You still need product development. You still need architecture. You still need governance, even though you do your agile transformation. But you have to do it differently. You have to do it based on the lean agile principles. And then some people get cross-eyed and I think, oh, principle, that sounds really, really boring. But it's for me as an architect, principles is a natural thing. It's a strong concept in the architecture community, not so much in other contexts, maybe, but they're really brilliant because when you do things differently, you have to do them with a different mindset that Rune was addressing also in his part earlier. You have to apply a different mindset on your operations. And that mindset boils down to the principles and very specifically describes what it is that you have to do differently. And as I said, I've been working for a long time with principles, and I have been looking for principles in different areas for a long, long time. And I really like the principles as they are formulated in the SAFe framework. And I don't just say this to be kind to my friend Rune here. They are very well explained and very pragmatic in their approach. And if you don't understand the principles, now I'm relating back to my conversations with customers. If you don't understand the basic principles, it will be hard for you to decide where you should do different, how much you should do different, and how you should change your processes, your structures, and your tools, for instance, because the principles will be the guideline or the compass when you have to choose between different options. So, to me, portfolio management is lean portfolio management is portfolio management based on flow and other lean agile principles. That's why it's so crucial to understand what they are all about. And you did a good approach to these principles, Rune, and they are formulated in the framework. So for you out there listening, if you need an introduction to lean agile principles, you can find them in the Agile Manifesto, you can find them in the lean theory, and you can also find them in the SAFe framework, boiled together and packaged in a very comprehensible way. But it's about maximizing the business outcomes when you talk about portfolio management. It could be a collection of applications, it could be a collection of products, it could be a collection of value streams if you're into the modern flow-based production systems. Some sort of assets that you collectively maximize for business outcomes. That's the general reason for portfolio management. Also, I would like to mention planning, funding, and prioritizing together. And this is also a good example where the principles guide you, because traditionally we are not used to do this so much together. We are more used to focus on our product, our team, our solution, and prioritizing whatever comes into that smaller area of work, funding that particular product, that particular team, planning for that particular team. So we need to, based on the principles, learn how to do this together. And this is very, very hard for traditional organizations. I had one quite funny experience a while ago at a customer. They said that we are very, very good at prioritizing, but we can't plan what we prioritized. And when we dig into that, it turned out that when they say that they prioritize, they just collect all the good things that they want done. And they don't prioritize the bad things that would never have a chance to be done. That was their prioritization. And when we dig into that, we see that all these prioritized things that they wanted done would take up the capacity for the whole organization for maybe 4 or 5 years. So that's their prioritization. And to me, that's not prioritizing. To me, that's at the best a very early triage that you do, sorting out the stuff that makes no sense. Then you need to prioritize. You have to apply the Lean Agile principles of breaking things down into smaller pieces. You have to apply the principles of flow, getting things done, getting feedback, and allow yourself to reprioritize. But most important, you have to have a sort of sequence of what's the single most important initiative or things that we want to achieve as a company. What's the next most important things? So you get the sequence. If you learn that, if you break things down and you prioritize together and you get a sequence of things based on their importance, then planning will be very much more easy. How could you plan for doing things for 4 or 5 years that involves the whole company? The whole company? That's impossible, right? That was a very good insight that we did. Also, one very important aspect of the lean portfolio management is to provide a shared vision based on the larger vision of the enterprise, of course, making all aware of what's the most important things to do right now to take us closer to the vision. That is a crucial instrument that will help us to prioritize. Okay, we understand the vision. This is the most important things that we need to do right now to take us further to the vision. This is also hard for a lot of organizations today, I see. Often you have some sort of vision mission statement, of course, but that's too generic most often to make any practical conclusions out of. So we need to practice also on formulating a strong vision for our portfolio, for our value stream, and for our art or team, and that make sure that they are aligned, making sure that everybody understands what's the most important thing now. So some of the principles, this is just examples, of course, that stands out a little bit to me when I talk about lean portfolio management. So why would you do this? What would you say would be the largest benefits of going into lean portfolio management, doing this transition that was so excellently formulated in your material, Rune, with a traditional approach on one side and the lean agile approach on the other side? I really like that. But if I zoom out of this and think about it, and how I also explain it to customers, is that this is the next big step towards business agility. And with business agility, I mean the wonderful future state where everybody in the company works together based on the lean agile principles to build wonderful, valuable products in an efficient way. Not only software or hardware development, but the whole company with all the competencies needed to develop and evolve these wonderful products. And what do I mean by the next big step? Well, to me, or as it has been working with the Agile movement, is that almost always it starts on the operational level. You have Agile teams experimenting, maybe sort of in a rebellic fashion, introducing more efficient, more modern, more fun ways to work, and you build up a capability to getting things done in a much better way than before. Maybe going from a project to a more product-based structure. So getting things done with Agile team is the starting point. And what really accelerated this, the first big step for me, as I see it, is DevOps. DevOps really accelerated this. So DevOps was the first big enabler that really made us capable to getting things done faster and with high quality. But it's not about only getting things done and getting them done right. You also have to get the right things done. Now we're back to prioritizing and the concept of value and business outcomes. How do we ensure that even though the teams are quite efficient building product increments in a fast pace, how do we ensure that they are always working on the most valuable thing? That's when we need to extend DevOps into the business. And we need to make sure that we can build the right things at the right time. So this is where lean portfolio sort of extends DevOps into the business and makes an end-to-end value stream from a business opportunity to a released product increment that we agreed upon is valuable to prioritize and focus on and getting done. So, sort of tying it all together, and sometimes you heard the phrase BIS DevOps. To me, that's the same approach here, but you really need to think about the portfolio level, or whatever you call it in your organization, for how to tie all this together to make sure that you have an extended value stream from idea to release. So how do we start? Well, of course, back to the principles again, relating to also your material, Rune. Perfect start is to educate yourself, either by formal training or by studying by other means. But you really need to understand the foundational principles and get going, experimenting. Practice. You need practice, and be very cautious not to have a transformation designed as a waterfall product when you try to do an Agile transformation. That might sound strange, but it's very common in my experience that you rush into sort of an Agile transformation project and you make a very detailed plan for how everything is supposed to work when you're Agile. And then you're done, and you can focus on something else. It doesn't work that way. You have to build that competency from bottom up, in my experience. You have to learn the basic principles. You have to understand where it's smart to begin, build something that works, that you can later on scale. And in some occasions, that could be quite painful, and you will probably fail a few times. We see that a lot in organizations. But you need to stand strong and learn from your mistakes. It's okay to fail, because then you learn and then you can have a slightly different approach. But if you do the big bang waterfall approach to this, then you can't afford to fail. If you spend millions of dollars and involve all the expensive coach consultants and so on, then you can't afford to fail. So you need a lean agile approach to your agile transformation as well. And when I try to explain to customers what an agile transformation really is about, it is about finding your own way to implement the lean agile principles into your own organization. That's what it all boils down to. And from a LPM perspective, we could just take some examples of these principles that you can find in the framework, the SAFe framework, or otherwise. The economic view, of course, is important. When you start looking at your portfolio management with lean agile eyes, you realize that your funding process has to change, your investment structure has to change, maybe your whole economic framework needs to change over time. And that could be very, very challenging in these discussions. So you also in parallel have to be aware of how much are we prepared to change? Do we have any sacred cows that we can't even talk about changing, like economic frameworks and budget processes in some organizations? How do we address that then? Is this a prioritized area where we need to focus on, or could we postpone it to later? Also, the principles of flow, of course, explained by you also, Rune. That's what it's all about. As I said also in the previous slide, getting things done at the right time with the right quality, that's crucial. And to do that, you need to understand the lean side of the principles, breaking things down into smaller parts to allow you to get constant fast feedback loops telling you if you are on the right track or not. And we're not used to that either. When we come from a product-based approach or a product-based company, we usually have very much longer cycles. I remember back in the days when Rational Unified Process was the major framework, the RUP process, and you at the end of each project, you were supposed to do a lessons learned activity. And we had projects going for 2 or 3 years at that point. And after 3 years, you should reflect on, oh, what could we have done better during these 3 years? That's absolutely crazy, of course, in a modern setting. Also, again, planning and prioritizing together. I couldn't emphasize this enough in my customer discussions as well. And maybe related also to the economic framework discussions, this could be a hard point for people to accept, because when we prioritize things together, maybe I won't get my voice heard as I did before. Maybe some other products or solutions being developed in the company should be prioritized, and then I lose maybe some of my mandate or power. So there is always an informal power structure that you need to be aware of, and that these discussions can be sensitive in that manner. And maybe you need, when you start this initiative to apply lean portfolio management, you need to prepare all the people being involved, especially on the management level, what's going to happen to them. And at least try to have everybody be open to these kinds of discussions and see where that leads you. So, trying to foresee the last slide here before we open up for questions. I see the time is running away, which it does fast when you are having fun, right? So, a few tips at last for how to get started. Like I said, like any other part of your business, learn the foundational principles and then practice. Oh, sorry. I didn't. There we go. Pick up. Start when you have something to scale, was what I intended to say. You need, from a portfolio perspective at least, you need to have something working that is based on the Lean Agile principle. So you need probably Agile teams in some form that is working well. You could argue about this, but that's a general recommendation that I would say. If you have something that is working, build on that. So the first question is to see, do we have that anywhere in our organization? Where is it working well? And the point is not to find the place where it's the hardest to start. On the contrary, I would say start where it's the easiest, where you have the most momentum, when you have the most knowledge about what it means to work based on Lean Agile principles. You also need to think about the business opportunities. Is it a good business case to implement this? Should we do it all over the company at once? Or should we start where it makes the most bang for the bucks? And you also need leadership engagement, not only leadership sponsorship. You see that sometimes, or at least I do. You need really strong engagement from the management level, from the leadership, because probably they are the ones that have to change the most, especially from a portfolio management perspective. You can't delegate the responsibility to change. They are the people that needs to change, and I have to be really involved, and I have to be, to some extent, also open to change and to discuss changes in the power structure and how to change the funding and financing processes and so on. So I guess that's what was all from my point as well. I hope this made good sense to you all. And I can see that we have at least one question already in the chat from Sebastian. It's been there for a while. I guess it came up under your presentation, Rune, but we can reflect on it together. And for you other guys out there, please take opportunity to just share your questions or thoughts or reflections in the chat, and we can try to address it together.
Sure. Do you want me to give a shot at Sebastian's question? It's pretty good, by the way.
Yes, please do.
Yeah. So, as you can see in the chat, are you saying to avoid milestones or consider MVP milestones rather? Can see SAFe still speaks about milestones. Yes, absolutely, SAFe speaks about milestones. So what I would like you to do, I don't want you to avoid milestones. I want you to review the way you view milestones, really. So we still have a business, and the business still needs to plan. We can't come and say, no, we do Agile, we don't do planning. You can come to our demo and then see how we're doing. That's not how things work. Think about the iPhone. iPhone launched in September. I mean, that milestone doesn't go away. I have a SAFe Summit in August. I have presentations to review. That milestone doesn't go away. What we want to move away from what we call phase-gated milestones. So milestones that doesn't really tell us anything about the real progress and that locks down requirements too early. You know, requirements done, design done. They don't provide objective evidence on the solution we're doing. We want to move to something else. So this is what I talked about, changing milestones. So we want to have milestones that do this objective evaluation. We want to have demonstrations of the systems we're building. How are they acting? How are they performing? We want to acknowledge that fixed date milestones are still there. We have sometimes a year when we have the annual budgets. They don't go away either. And we need to have a look at that as well. We have, like with the iPhone, or in my example, our summit, we have market rhythm and events. They don't go away. We need to know about them. We need to know when they are expected, so we can plan and adjust our plans accordingly, tweak the scope, etc. When you talk about MVPs specifically in here, we don't measure them with this phase-gated milestone. We usually design specific metrics for specific MVPs. We call that innovation accounting, where we try to measure and find out how do we fulfill this hypothesis that we want to test before we do the big investment initiative. So, for example, it's a simple thing. We're doing some kind of app. What do you want to measure, whether it's working or not? Well, maybe you can measure conversion rate. How many people have actually converted from using our free version to a paid version? That's a pretty good indication of whether they're using it or not. Whereas we have something called vanity metrics, things that makes us feel good but doesn't really tell anything. That could be, for that app example, how many times have we downloaded the app? Doesn't really tell us anything about if it's used or if they pay for it, but the graph being downloads will always go up. So it always makes us feel good. So yes, we have different metrics. Yes, you need to look at it. And when we talk about MVP, you will probably have very specific metrics measuring the success or failure of that MVP.
Excellent. I might add to that as well, because this is close to heart as an architect as well. If you, as an architecture function, especially on the enterprise level, if you use milestones and phase gates as an instrument for control, to give you a sense of that you are in control of what's going on, then the question is not, how can I still have these phase gates and milestones, although we do our Agile transformation? The proper question is, how can we apply governance in the appropriate amount without impeding flow? Yeah, probably not by phase gates and milestone. We will have to find other mechanisms to apply the appropriate level of control or governance. And that could be informed, of course, again, by the principles. But you have to phrase the right questions.
Super.
Oh, thank you. Another question from Jesper. Whom do you see as a good candidate to work in the LPM function? Should you have a strong Agile background, or do you need more of a strategic portfolio background? What say you? Should I go first on this one?
You go first, then we can see if we agree. That's going to be fun.
Yeah. I strongly suggest that you still need, or my basic assumption is that the people involved in portfolio management today is still required, because they have pretty much the business competencies and skills that you need to provide portfolio management. But you need to educate and train them in the lean Agile principles, and then they need very strong coaching. And that is crucial. And it's very strange to me that you have Scrum Masters and Agile coaches in multitude, often on team levels, but almost none on management level. That is very strange. Maybe we will see that over a few years change. But I would recommend that you form some sort of center of excellence or something that could provide the lean Agile competence and the lean Agile perspective that works closely with the portfolio managers to help them make the transition, to help them build the mindset required to establish flow on portfolio level.
Yeah, and let me add to that, because I fully agree with you on this one. There's another little challenge here, is the majority, at least that's what I see from the transformations I've been in, the majority of organizations' portfolio management has a very strong presence in the politics that's going on, and knows the ins and outs of the company, just like you mentioned. We absolutely need that. Don't go out and lay these people off. You will need them. Yeah. But very few of them have Agile experience. On the other hand, you have your Agile coaches that's been going on in the organization and helping out. They're really skilled at this. but they typically have very little portfolio experience. So going a little bit back to our roots in the Agile values, creating a cross-functional team where you have both competences present, naturally you need to have them trained. Absolutely, in all of these things, no doubt about that. But having both sides, the hardcore agility part and then the hardcore portfolio part, I think you get the most constructive conversation going on between these people.
Yes. Yes, and at some points I see a gap here or a problem area, because most commonly Agile coaches operate on team level. They can talk with teams, they are technical, and you can't take that kind of Agile coach and just put it up on portfolio level, if you understand what I say. You need Agile coaches that understands the politics and the economics and the dynamics and the language on management level as well. So in my view, that's a scarce resource right now. Maybe something to think about for the future. Okay.
Good question.
Yes, thank you very much for your questions. Last opportunity to see if there is something else. We are 1 minute over 5 here, so probably people want to go home for dinner and stuff. Good. Jesper agrees. Any tip to get leadership attention? Last question here from Sebastian. How to get leadership attention aside traditional escalations? Good questions. What do you say, Rune? Do you have anything?
Yeah, so I start a little bit with that one. You know, I usually like asking questions until people get really, really tired of me. So again, back to my second slide. Do these challenges sound familiar? That's actually the discussion you want to have. You want to understand. It's not always that leadership see there's a burning platform. They don't see the problem. I mean, things has been working fine. They thought project management was doing fine. They thought portfolio management was doing great. For lean analysis on it, it took time, it took effort, and we found out the average project finished. You know, what would 96 weeks in average to finish something from idea? Of course, it was not.
Yeah.
So it's looking at those typical challenges we have and support them with data in your organization. That will get a foothold. Finding that burning platform to really recognize there is a problem to solve.
Yeah. Excellent. You were breaking up a little bit there, but I hope everybody got your answer. So maybe that was the last comment for today. I would really like to thank you all again being with us today. And if you have any questions further, don't hesitate to contact me or Biner or Rune and Scaled Agile. And if you want to dig in more to the concept of lean portfolio management and take some training, just go into our website and book something, and you will get started there. So thank you, Rune, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you. It was great being here. Bye.